I don't know about you, Wes, but that, I guess for lack of a better term, sex scene in this episode reminded me a lot of Demolition Man. Do you remember in Demolition Man how they have that weird like psychic sex thing?
Yeah.
Isn't it strange how Demolition Man ended up being like the most prescient of the future movies?
the most on the ball, sort of, even with it can't hide behind its sarcastic, satirical tone. It just ended up in the right spot at the right place, and just obviously went on to influence all of sci-fi that came out after it. When did Demolition Man's a 90s movie, right? Early 90s?
Yeah, I've been watching the Michael Jordan documentary, so I learned that Dennis Rodman started dyeing his hair after he saw Demolition Man, so I want to say like 1995.
Oh, okay.
I didn't make that up. That's actually true.
How's that Jordan documentary anyway?
It's really good.
Is
yeah,
it?
It's very fun.
So we're going to be talking about Unexpected today. It is the latest episode of Star Trek Enterprise. But first, let's take a break and play a clip, and then we'll come back and we'll break it down.
The only female I had any contact with was Alen, their engineer. Other than repairing the reactor, all she and I did together was go into this holographic chamber they've got. She showed me some home movies, simulations of their planet, but I didn't lay a hand on her. There's got to be some way to get this thing out of me without hurting it. Can't you create a surrogate chamber or something?
The embryo has integrated with your pericardium. I wouldn't be comfortable extracting it without more information on the gestation process.
This engineer wanted you to see her planet?
So?
Perhaps the next step would have been to meet her holographic parents. If I'm not mistaken, on some planets, that's a precursor to marriage.
We took a ride in a rowboat.
All right. Unexpected is the 5th episode of the first season. It first aired on October 17th, 2001. Written by Rick Berman and Brannon Braga. Directed by Mike Vehar. The in-universe date is unknown. It's 2151 still. In this episode, when Trip Tucker assists an alien vessel with repairs, a friendly encounter with one of the crew leads to a rather unexpected consequence. So we're going to talk about Unexpected, which is a reviled episode, Clay, critically. And my main point is that I think it's the best episode of Star Trek Enterprise that's come around so far. We've only seen 4 or 5 or however you want to do it, but I think this episode is actually very funny in a lot of I think it's funny in a way that's unusual for Star Trek, which is not just a kind of one-off joke button of a scene, but they have extended sequences where I think everyone is being really funny, but from the actors to the writing, like the scene where Trip is in sickbay with Phlox, Archer, and T'Pol, and they're telling him that he's pregnant. I think that whole sequence, which is about 2 minutes long, is actually very funny the whole way through. Yeah. But people do not like this episode in general, or at least the vast majority of criticism I was reading was saying this is one of the worst episodes of Enterprise. It's offensive. It's all that stuff. But what was your first takeaway?
I'm somewhere in the middle. My reaction is not that negative to it as some of those that you're citing, but I thought it was like I never really thought it got going in a way that was satisfying, and once he became pregnant, I didn't think that it was as funny as it could have been. But I really liked the first half of it. I thought the whole thing about going to the ship was really interesting, and it being really disorienting, and there being all of the stuff that they had to get used to. I thought the holodeck thing was fun. And then when he came back, it's literally like half the episode, and by that point, I didn't really think that there was a ton driving it forward at that point. And after they find out he's pregnant, I didn't think that they obviously were playing it for comedy, but I just didn't feel like it was as funny as it could have been. And ultimately, the other thing that bummed me out the most, I was almost positive that it was going to turn out that they were doing this on purpose because of the way that they were trailing the Klingons. I thought like that was their thing. Like they were this parasitic kind of race that was essentially forcibly impregnating people.
Right. They sort of either spread their species or they get something out of doing this to other. So they kind of pretend that they need help and someone comes over and helps them and then they get them infected. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was really surprised that Archer, not even for a second, thought that was the case when he saw that they were doing the same thing to the Klingons, because it seems like it should be a scam.
Yeah. Right.
And then they're like, no, it worked for like 6 days and then it broke. It was just really convenient. I was surprised that they didn't go the other way with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I wouldn't say it was terrible. I've continued to actually fairly enjoy these episodes. If I don't think they're perfect, I don't even think that they're great, but I think that they are. I appreciate what they're trying to do in the this is in the quote unquote, this is the first time that any of this has happened in the Star Trek universe.
Yeah.
Also, how did that not end with like the Klingons blowing up the other ship after the Enterprise leaves, and the Klingons stealing their cloaking technology or something?
Yeah. Do the Klingons have cloaks at this time? Probably not, right?
I just assumed that's where they were going with it, is that these guys have cloaking technology and the Klingons don't care for the holodeck, even though that holodeck scene was hilarious when the guy says, I can see my husband. That was really funny. But I was sure that the thing that they were going to be interested in was the cloaking technology, not the holodeck.
Yeah, there's one criticism that's kind of off of that I do kind of like. It didn't trigger in me as I was watching it, but on reflection and when someone brought it up, I kind of agree with it, that it almost, the people who were writing contemporary reviews at the time were like, are you front loading too much? Look at how all this lore came to be stuff into these episodes. And I didn't really think that in the holodeck aspect, because I thought that the holodeck stuff here worked pretty well because it felt like it was not really all that important. It was almost like an accidental discovery that they came across, and it wasn't like it was a huge focus to see like, this is where the holodeck came from and this is the big epic storyline that came about from it. It was more just these aliens have it, and to get out of a situation, we'll give it to the Klingons so that they're happy with it. But I do like if what you were saying, that I think I would enjoy your story a little bit more. However, at that point, it would really feel like you were just loading up lore origins at that point. Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough call with stuff like this because it's, I think it depends on what it's in service of, because if it's in service of it not just showing, oh, that's how the Klingons got cloaking technology, but the way that they do it is if they do blow up their ship or something, it shows Archer and Starfleet that the Klingons are not fucking around.
Yeah.
Then I think it works a little bit there. It depends on how much attention you draw to it as well, Because
it's also, I think the Klingons themselves feed into it, where I like to see the Klingons, but the more that Enterprise plays with this notion that they run into the Klingons quite frequently, the more it kind of cancels out what was previously known about the relationship between the Klingons and the humans,
Yeah. And as far as the Klingons go, obviously this isn't a Klingon episode, but I
like seeing the ship. I like it. It felt.
Well, technically, they don't get the D5 until after the Klingon War and Discovery.
The D5. Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, the thing about the Klingons, I know this is going to sound maybe sort of hypocritical based on what I may have said at Discovery. I don't remember. I find it really strange seeing TNG-era Klingons in this show.
In terms of their makeup, like, the way that they look.
I feel like they should look different. I don't think I want them to look like Discovery Klingons, where it's basically unrecognizable from what you're used to.
Yeah.
But it's 100 years in the past, right?
I mean, I would think that they should look. My ideal setup for them would have been TNG makeup mixed with the clothing style of the TOS Klingons.
Sure, something like that. It's just It feels like they haven't really put any thought into what Klingons 100 years prior to TNG, or even like how long is this? Is this 100 years?
Yeah, this is 100 before. So it's 200 before TNG, 100 before TOS.
Okay, that's even more egregious. They're flying the same ships that they were 100 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like there's a little wiggle room there to tweak things, and I think that would be part of the fun too. Is if you see Klingons like, oh, cool, yeah, they haven't gotten that yet. Their ships look kind of like
right.
Same thing they do with Enterprise. I'm really surprised that they didn't do that.
That's a good point. They're so I suppose I don't really think about it here. I like the way that the Klingons are inserted into this one, even if I do kind of wonder that maybe you're showing them a little bit too frequently. But they're like they continue to do this thing that I think is really effective, where the humans are at a disadvantage compared to everybody else. Like they stand no chance against this Klingon ship. It shoots at them, and they have nothing to do except try to talk their way out of it. And I like how it ties into Broken Bow, in that they know who Archer is at that point, and I like the fact that it's kind of a it treats the Klingons as Klingons while also being very funny with the I can see my house from here kind of line.
That might have been a little much. I wish they had thought of a more Klingon way for him to say that.
Because I think that's the problem with the criticism of this. Right? Like when I read the criticisms of this episode, it reads to me. Well, they all read extremely woke, basically. It's this is offensive because blah 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 blah. But my perspective on it is it's obviously intentionally a comedy. It's a comedy episode, and I don't They
just saw the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Junior, and they thought it was hilarious.
It's fresh on their minds, and not that it's some great idea or anything, but I thought while keeping it a Star Trek episode and keeping it fairly lighthearted and fairly funny, they did a good job of They did a good job of sort of keeping it lighthearted enough to be just a fun little romp episode, and it never really delves into it's not an episode that's asking what does this mean for humanity that a man can be pregnant at this point. But I also don't think that they treat pregnancy with disrespect or anything. I don't think that there's any semblance of, maybe the jokes are slightly tropey, but I don't think that there's anything there's no blackface comedy humor in this. It's not out of date or anything. It's just kind of a commentary on the pregnancy, and you could say that maybe Trip is turning into I don't think the script touches on this, but he's getting more of an empathic side or something where he's sort of relating to this kid. I like the scene where he's in engineering and he's concerned about the safety bars being too high. I just think stuff like that is kind of funny, and I don't find it stereotypical or anything. It just strikes me as kind of a lighthearted, fun thing.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little surprised that the criticism is so harsh in that sense, because it's not, it's not really pushing any boundaries or anything.
I'd be more it kind of goes into, can you really get that upset about an episode that you think accidentally treads into something uncomfortable, right? It's not like you come out with an episode and your script is so morally and ethically bankrupt that you're I can't believe they thought this was a good idea. This is just a joke built on a premise that, modern criticism seems to have a very hard time separating response to things in terms of what the intent of someone was. If someone says something and they mean it, it's one thing to go after them, but they say something by accident, people now just seem to go equally hard at them, even though it's clearly not the intent of what they were trying to do. And that just feels like the case here, where if this episode was trying to be deep and it was trying to make some kind of commentary on female pregnancy, and they did it by impregnating Trip, and they did it kind of clumsily, I would say that's probably a worse idea than just making a comedy episode about this.
Yeah, this is not, what's the Deep Space? Is it Prophet and Lace?
Right, the Ferengi dressing, the Ferengi and drag, right?
Yeah, when Quark dresses up as his mother or something, or I forget what it is, but he's in drag, and it's not a great look. Even then, it probably was questionable, but now it's not great. Yeah, this is not that. I don't know. I don't see what that reaction would stem from. I mean, even as far as that stuff goes, it's 10 minutes tops in the episode. Right. It's not like it's this long, drawn out treatise on men being pregnant or how hilarious. It's just, I don't know. I don't think there's enough there to get that mad about.
No, I think people think that it's an extension of, you remember the original series episode, the final one, Turnabout Intruder, where Kirk becomes a woman and a woman becomes Kirk. Kirk is stuck in a woman's body.
Oh, sure.
And so it's Shatner, hamming it up to 11, acting like a woman would act as he's like interrogating himself, who is sitting in the chair. And I think that they think it's that kind of a thing. I don't get that.
I don't think that at all.
Yeah.
I didn't find I didn't think that like once he became pregnant, he started becoming more like effeminate or in like an arch way or anything like that. I feel like he gets more emotional, but he gets more emotional in the way that
anyone
would get emotional. Yeah, anyone. Yeah. It's not like he starts asking, the old stereotype of like asking Archer to go get him a jar of pickles and a scoop of ice cream. It's not like that hammy, ridiculous stuff.
Yeah.
He's emotional and outraged in a way that seems consistent with him as a character. It didn't seem like that they were trying to make him like,
play on all the woman trope, woman pregnant tropes. Yeah. Because I think that if you're going to say that, if you're going to appreciate this series for sort of taking place at the very beginning of when all this stuff was happening, I think his reaction is totally appropriate to be like, "What the fuck? Like I went over there to help them, and this is this."
Yeah.
But and obviously,
I mean, not to mention the fact that he was arguably raped.
Yeah, I think that's the other criticism that comes into it. It's one of these episodes where something semi-analogous to rape happens, and people are just like, you can't have this in a TV show. And it's like, well, like I think there's a strong enough argument here that this is hard to define as rape, basically. Like it's more like an infection that she gave him. And like could you consider this rape if he were to go off and if they never found out about if he did not get pregnant from this, right? Would he have the sense that he was raped in that situation? You know what I mean? Like
no,
if
he would not.
No, he wouldn't. Maybe, I don't know what the aliens don't seem to have that sort of opinion either, because they don't treat it that way. But it's just I'm just semi-tired of that criticism of these episodes, and I don't think it's really fair. I think there's other things you could criticize this one about it, and the sort of narrative problems and things like that. But I just don't see those bad intentions that the criticism seem to have. And I'm talking a lot about the criticism mostly because I think this episode is very enjoyable, and I laughed at it in a way that I'd never really laugh at Star Trek episodes.
And with that in mind, I think if the aliens had turned out to be doing this on purpose, then you get a much darker edge to that scene.
Yes,
I think.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of why they didn't go that way. But that scene as it stands, it's like, not to get into this, but because it's entirely theoretical and doesn't actually exist. But I guess it would come down to how this race perceives the act of what they did together.
Yeah.
Because she says the thing where she's like, "Oh, I didn't think that would happen between two different species," but like we have no concept of how seriously they take whatever it was they did with those rocks or whatever.
Right.
Like it's a really difficult thing to just categorize this scene. That I don't even really know how to describe what I'm trying to say here, because it's like I feel like based on what's in this episode, it's a bit of a stretch to write it off because it's an undealt with rape.
Yeah. Well,
like, and I'm totally I'm fine when people get into that stuff where it's warranted, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel like it's a weird. This is a weird episode to call that on.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that sort of goes in the favor of that is that the Enterprise is certainly portraying the aliens they run into as very alien. Like, they're very weird.
Right.
It's not the sort of TNG or TOS stuff where you beam over to their ship and it's exactly like your ship because they redesigned the sets or something and it's just a different color. The first half of this episode is just built on how long it takes for the decontamination and decompression to go through, and he's just kind of sitting there and he's getting like, I don't know if he's getting hallucinating because of the decompression or whatever, but he's getting sick because he's over there because they have strobe lights and loud noises going constantly. But it's just they do a good job of making them significantly different, and the ending where she's like, I didn't know I could do that to other species. That also implies that it's kind of an accident. The only thing that's maybe a strange decision is that they do hint at a kind of TOS Kirk in season 3. There's sexual tension here, and I don't really know why, other than the fact that Enterprise seems to really want to up its sex appeal. That needed to happen. Like, what if you just portrayed those two as perfectly cordial coworkers, right? And she shows him this game, and there's no sexual tension between them. Then it can kind of seem that it's just he gets pregnant by almost like total ignorance as to what was going on. She's like, hey, let me show you this telepath game that we have. And then he gets pregnant. She's like, oh, geez, like that was a real mistake that I did that. I think the sexual tension adds a level of she knows what she's doing, kind of, but she thinks that she's using birth control, basically, because it's another species. So maybe there's something there, but at the same time, Trip would go on none the wiser. Maybe that's a bad argument, but it just doesn't seem like there's a hostility there. And if they wanted to completely neuter it, I would just remove any of the sexual connotations that are brought up earlier, because I don't really know what the point of that is anyway, other than a weird reference to like 60s mores.
Yeah. Like I have much more difficulty with is it Star Trek 6 where Spock forcibly mind melds with Kim Cattrall?
Savik, right? Is that Savik?
No, it's not Savik. It's the Savik stand-in. It's Kim Cattrall. I can't remember the character.
Okay.
But like that's a little bit more troubling to me than this is, because that's him
grabbing
that's
her.
That's a character of power and esteem in the series, forcibly invading somebody else's violating their personal being. That's a little bit more troubling than this, which is, I think given the context of this show and what they are trying to do, it doesn't strike me as anything that needs to be viewed as insidious, because so much of this is them sort of stumbling through their interactions with the aliens.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's a weird thing to come down on so hard.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't think it's, I can see that opinion if you don't think the episode's funny. You seem to be sort of down the middle about whether or not I think it's funny, but I would just reiterate again, like for a Star Trek episode, I'm like the scene with just Paul saying keep your fingers out of things or whatever is like, that's just it's a strange, very funny turn for T'Pol and for Archer, and like Archer laughing about this and everyone being kind of uncomfortable. I don't know. I find it sort of charming in its humor. Yeah.
And it's also not like, the other way they could have gone with it is they play the pregnancy as like a body horror angle.
Yes, yeah.
Which I think would
like
add
Alien,
much more
almost
of a,
like this, yeah.
Which would definitely add a much darker connotation to what's going on and the way that he became pregnant, definitely. But I mean, ultimately, he's kind of cool with it.
Yeah.
He's like, it's kind of embarrassing, but when it comes to when he goes back to the ship, he's like happy to hear that it's going to be taken care of, and so it is a
very pro-life episode, right? They don't
definitely.
They don't just terminate the pregnancy. They are like, well, let's go see if we can find the aliens and give it to them.
Yeah, there's no moment where he's like, I don't care what you have to do, just get this damn thing out. There's none of that. He's just sort of like, okay, I guess I'm dealing with this now.
Yeah. Because I think that, they call it a pregnancy in the episode, and I guess that's just because you're supposed to interpret it as a young alien or whatever, but I feel that they do a lot of work to separate it from being an actual pregnancy. Like, it's almost like he has a tumor or like an infection or a tumor on him that only these aliens can cure by bringing them back to him and something like that. But the comedy mostly just comes from the fact that, the crew members are going to refer to this as a pregnancy, and he doesn't want anybody to know about it, and he's upset about the handrail safety issues and things. And outside of that, I'll again just praise I do think that the aliens in this show are very strange in a way that is unique to the franchise. They're all very alien and very weird, and they have just weird things that they do. And everyone seems a little bit off when you meet them, and the makeup is good and things like that. I just think they do a good job of portraying what these first encounters would be like.
Yeah, I really liked the whole sequence of Trip going over to the ship and having to be in decontamination or whatever he was in, the adjustment thing for so long. I liked that, and I liked when they finally opened it to the ship, and it was like something out of The Prisoner.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like this weird psychedelic thing, and
there's grass on the floor, which is a funny thing. Yeah.
At first.
Oh, sorry. All I could think of was your George Bush comment when he's talking over the comm badge about the grass. He sounds exactly like Bush. He's like, "You're not going to believe it. They got grass on the floor." He's like, "It's crazy. What color is the grass on Vulcan?" It's very much like Will Ferrell doing a George Bush impersonation.
Yeah, and I did think when they opened the door to the ship, I was like, man, these guys, even on this show, they've got like shag carpet on these starships. But then it turned out to be actual real grass, which was fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that stuff. I have been enjoying how alien they are treating these encounters. They are surprisingly, well, I was going to say they are surprisingly not as what's the word I'm looking for? They're not as there's not as much conflict as I was expecting.
Yeah.
Or like negative reaction from the humans as I was expecting. It seems to be just like a bunch of small misunderstandings so far.
Yeah.
But I have appreciated how alien everything seems to be. And I was surprised that Trip was so is he supposed to be kind of like the McCoy of this group, where he's kind of doesn't want to be here? Because it seems like he's always the one who's kind of freaking out. He seems to talk a big game, but anytime they put him into a situation, he just loses his mind. Because in this one he goes over to the ship and he starts freaking out. And in the last one, he was in the cave and he starts freaking out. Is that his thing?
I think he's like McCoy in he sort of speaks honestly to power or the situation. Mm-hmm. Like he's not one to sort of bite his tongue about what he thinks is going on. But he I don't know. I see Trip as more into the going out and trying things, but all the stuff always happens to him, sort of, where the show's a little bit more limited than the other series, I think, because it's really just T'Pol, Trip, and Archer are the main three in a very TOS kind of way. But he does get the brunt of that kind of stuff thrown on him. And I think that the actor is fairly good. Like we haven't had a chance to see him, but the actor who plays Malcolm Reed, I'm not reading a lot of range on his reaction to things like this. I think that Trip is the character who's possible to play in comedy situations like this, and also the serious situations, like the cave one where he's supposed to be flipping out in a realistic way, and this one where he's having more of a funny reaction to things. Yeah,
he's doing a good job. I think he's pretty good. But yeah, I forget what were we talking about, the aliens. I like how alien the aliens are. And I do. How do you feel about the holodeck showing up so early? Like, because you know we talked about it a little bit, but that's a really specific thing to pull out in this show that's supposed to be 200 years before the holodeck shows up. Yes,
it's very. It is a little bit too early, because if TOS has never heard of this kind of a thing, I almost would have appreciated it if they had given it a more rudimentary feel to it. You know, maybe, I don't know, because it's basically functioning exactly like a holodeck would function. Right. And maybe I'd be, if you wanted to pick nits or something, you could say that maybe the humans don't get the holodeck at the end of this episode, right? The Klingons have it, but the humans don't get that technology. So maybe that makes sense that it would skip TOS or something, and you're just getting hints at it. I'm not super concerned. It's not. I don't know why it bothers me less than stuff like this in Discovery. Probably because the holodeck technology, as I said at the top, is not the point of this episode. It's just something that's in it, where the spore drive feels like such a colossal change that it would have to impact the rest of canon. Yeah,
the spore drive is just it breaks everything open to the point where they couldn't continue the show unless they got rid of it.
Right,
which
yeah.
is just ridiculous.
And I think that the holodeck here is very small. It's just kind of they don't even call it a holodeck. They're just like, look at this fancy holographic room that we're in.
They were dancing around it though. It was almost as though when Trip got back, he was like, it was so cool. They had this deck. I would say it was made entirely of holograms. It's like, yeah, right.
I think he uses a word I've never heard before, though. Holography, I think he says.
Holography?
Holography. I just think of the Simpsons joke where it's like, and this is the killing floor, and the kids all gasp. He says, don't be alarmed by the name. It's not actually a floor. It's just a layer of grate that allows the inner organs to fall through.
Yes.
Let's see here. Unexpected. Anything else about this one?
I thought that Archer really jumped to some interesting conclusions on how to find that ship. He was super specific. Where they're like, oh, we've got this thing, this like buildup of plasma behind us. He's like, what happens if we blow that up? And then they blow it up, and he's like, okay, stop the camera right as it explodes. And they stop, and he's like, look, just as I thought, there's a ship there. It's like, what? How did you? Not
even just as it explodes. He's like, a couple frames forward, please, and it does.
Yeah, yeah. Stop at the flashpoint and then click forward too. Enhance, and it was a very specific solution to a problem that was clearly something they had not seen before.
Yeah, no, he's Archer's kind of like that. I do like Archer in the when he's handling Trip as he's going through his decontamination or decompression thing, and he keeps calling him to like check in and say that he wants to come home. I do like Archer's reaction to that, where he's trying to just be like, get the job done, and then you can come back.
I guess that's part of what I found strange about this, because they are playing it for comedy, obviously, but Archer is oddly unconcerned.
Yeah.
Everything that's happening to Trip involving this brand new alien species.
I was thinking there's no way to rescue him because they can't beam him back. Yeah, it's that kind of a thing. Yeah.
He doesn't even like keep in contact with, or I guess he does keep in contact with the aliens, but he totally takes them at their word that they're not like getting ready to vivisect Trip alive.
They have that suspicious line, right? They're like, we interact with a lot of species. And Archer's like, oh, I'm sure you're fine then. You know what's going on.
It's like he radios over and he's like, hey, my guy's not feeling too good, and they respond with, oh, he's fine.
That usually happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he pauses and he goes, well, I guess he's fine. It's strange. Like, and even when he comes back pregnant, he thinks it's hilarious.
Yeah.
He was just accidentally impregnated by an alien species they've never seen before. It could kill him. They don't know what the hell this is going to happen. And Archer thinks it's hilarious and can't wait to tell everybody. Archer's a terrible captain.
I would not disagree with that. I think that Archer is appropriately bad for this series. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder how much I should hold against him as being sort of making weird mistakes. Like, yes, that seems very strange. And as you were saying in the previous episode, I think it's more weird that the show doesn't comment on Archer making odd choices.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Well, it's just that if the show was commenting on this and Archer at the end of every episode is going like, oh, Jesus, like I really fucked that one up again, I think that there would be more of an awareness and you would kind of buy into his character. But the show tends to treat him like a Star Trek captain, which is that he is making the right decision and things are just going wrong beyond his control.
Yeah, like I feel like at this rate, after 5 or 6 episodes, they should have a scene where Malcolm and the other guy, whose name I don't know because he hasn't done anything yet.
Travis,
okay. Where Malcolm and Travis are like, man, can you believe this fucking hire that we got for this captain, this guy who just got here because of his name?
Yeah.
I mean, this guy's an idiot. There's no reason this guy should be a captain. He's just here because his dad built the ship.
Yeah. It's like, how can there be bad quarterbacks in the NFL? How can there not be 30 people in the United States who can throw a football competently? Right. Like, Why? How are we stuck with these guys? Yeah, it's that kind of a thing.
And also, like, the other thing, I just find it so funny how little this stuff seems to affect Archer. Because, like, even when they talk to the Klingons, he's like, "Yeah, is your shower acting weird? Because that just screwed my day up." And Trip's like, "Guy, I'm pregnant over here." He's like, don't worry about that.
Just like, I fell right on my balls when that gravity came back
To be fair, as you get older, there is a when you're younger, you don't fear anything, really. When you get older, you fear falling in the shower, especially if you've got like a tub with like a hard ceramic side that could really do some damage.
Yep.
So when he fell, sorry, hold on. The nursing home is calling me to come back to my room. When that thing went off and he fell, I was like, ooh, that's like the ultimate shower fall, where you're falling in the shower at a distance.
Yeah, right on the coccyx too. He just fell ass first into the tile.
Is that the first instance of anybody showering in a Star Trek show or movie?
That's a good question. I know they've mentioned sonic showers before, but I don't know if we've seen them. So it might be. Yeah. It reminds me, I just think of, I'm sort of transposing it in my mind with the anti-gravity kill in Undiscovered Country, where the blood floats everywhere, just because the effect is very similar.
Yeah, I thought it was a fun way to open the show, though. It's like I think one of the things that they are doing pretty well is addressing the kinks and bugs in the system, whether it's the anti-gravity shower thing, or even, I know this is because of the ship chasing them, but like when T'Pol goes to get her seltzer water and it comes out as like muddy dog shit or whatever that was.
Yeah, they or just the print they use fire extinguishers to put out a fire and
right. Yeah. That's a hilarious. Do they have April Fool's Day in the 24th century or whatever? Like, because that's a really funny joke that would get everybody really mad at you if you programmed all the replicators to just whatever they asked for. It's just like dog pee. Why would you even program that in?
It's Google 2151 right there. Print out all your Gmail documents. I think we're done talking about this. I thought I had one more thing to say about this. I guess I didn't. Unexpected. We'll just call it there. We'll play a quote. We'll come back, read some Patron comments, and give our final thoughts about Unexpected.
I'm the one who repaired their warp reactor. Or at least I thought I did. I spent 3 days on their ship. They have some amazing technology. If you don't kill them, I'm sure they'd share it with you, teach you how to use it.
What kind of technology?
Well, for one, they've got some incredible holography. I don't know how advanced Klingon holograms are, but these are like nothing I ever saw before. Press a few buttons and you'll be standing on a hillside overlooking Kronos. It's unbelievable. Couldn't hurt to take a look.
Okay, so thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the content today. If you did enjoy it, you can go to patreon.com/thepenskyfile to support the show. A couple dollars a month gets you extra stuff. That's patreon.com/thepenskyfile. And as always, our Captain Tier supporters get a special shout out. So a very special thank you goes to Andrew Turlog, Ben Douglas, Cardinal Doomsday, Chris Tinsley, Chris Michaels, Christian Pouch, Darth Moss, David Beermore, David K, Dwayne Hackett, Eric Johnson, HH28, Jacob123, Jake Keys Gamer, Joint Mango, Jordan Cooper, Kevin Reyes, Kyle Barrett, Mad Courier 6, Matt Cutler, Matt Houston, Matt Ross, Mike Burnett, Nathan Elliott, Neil Brennan, Nick Sergio, Robert Cummins, Russell Elliott, Samuel Custer, Grim Santo, Sean, Stefan Minton, Tarek Latif, Tom Hiles, and Vault 13 Hero.
Do we have like 8 Matts? Did I hear that correctly?
There's 3 in a row. Oh, because it alphabetizes them by first name, but there's 3 Matts, yes.
Okay, it sounded like more than that. But.
We're of that generation, I think. Now, what was the most common boy and girl name when you were growing up? We're basically the same age, so I imagine they're similar. But
well, I didn't run into a ton of overlap when I was in school and stuff. You know, it was nothing that out of the ordinary number wise. But when I first started hanging out with my current long-term friend group, there were 3 Seans and 2 Jims.
Yeah.
A lot of Seans. And now I have subsequently, so I know 4 Seans.
Yeah. It's a lot of Seans.
You know, someone pointed out recently on another show, when was the last time you knew of a child being named Jason? I feel like Jason is very much of our generation.
It is, yeah.
And then after our generation, nobody is named Jason anymore.
No, the youngest Jason I know is probably 20-something. So it's like maybe it's a little bit younger than me, but it's certainly a name that's died out. There were when I was in high school, there were a billion Matts and a billion Elizabeths. Those were
Elizabeth. Yeah,
those were the names.
I didn't run into a lot of Elizabeth. I can't think. I don't think we had a ton of
Elizabeths. Can trick you because it's Liz, Beth. Like there's a lot of variations you can put on Elizabeth.
A lot of Katie, Kate and Katie.
A lot of Katies. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Thanks for joining us for Name Corner.
Entomology 101. Is entomology, right? Or is that study of bugs? What's the study of bugs?
Entomology is words.
Words.
The history of words, I think, or the study of words.
We'll stick with it. It's ironic to not know the word for the history of words, but
I know. And if I'm wrong, I look forward to hearing about it in the comments.
We've been wrong about my whole bit about the hats thing. Everyone's like, actually, the armed services wear hats, and you should be
roasted for that. Well, they should have better hats, is what we're saying.
Basically, you shouldn't look like you just stepped out of like Little League when you're going off to fight a war.
You shouldn't get the hats like the crew from Hidalgo gets.
Patreon.com/The Penske File. Thank you for supporting us. Let us know your name. Post on this episode with your name, and we'll see how many Matts there are and how many Elizabeths.
Yeah, entomology is the study of words, just the way that botany is the study of robots.
You're right. Exactly.
Yes.
So let's move on. We've got patron comments for this episode, which is, where is it? Unexpected. Matt Ross. The failure of the gravity plating is actually something I've always wondered about, and I found it humorous as well that the numerous system failure issues, this clearly isn't the 1701D. Phlox again is the normal guy, and T'Pol really needs to chillax and eat some bacon. Trip always is busy and in trouble, and this is a good episode, an example of that. And playing Simon to come out of the decompression chamber would make anyone a bit off. It seems like this is more of an acid trip hallucination, and I was waiting for the Snosberry looking to happen. Where O'Brien must suffer, Trip must show country charm and drawl to aliens that gets him in all sort of comedic situations. Essentially, the holodeck was made by the LSD aliens. T'Pol's ribbing of Trip and the crew's eyes rolling over Trip's pregnancy was fun, as was the development of his maternal instincts. The Klingon appearance was a nice touch, as was their hostility. An important note to wash your hands thoroughly and practice safe engineering.
We didn't really talk about T'Pol that much. I continue to really like her as a character and as a performance.
Yeah, she's coming together. I think it's really just her. I wouldn't even say her pilot performance is bad, but I think that the Vulcans were set up a little bit askew from what I would want in the pilot. But she's good. She Do you still not think she comes across as a little bit too angry, or does that not impact you? I think she's good here because she is kind of she's taking the lessons that she's been saying for the past 3 episodes, and then when Trip gets pregnant, she's like, "Told you." Like, why does no one listen to me? Which is the way that I think she's handling everything. But she sometimes seems, I don't know. Like, I think what it really does is it just highlights for me when Nimoy would play Spock as angry or frustrated. He did a good job of showing him frustrated without it looking like he was actually frustrated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I wonder if T'Pol can do that.
Well, what I like about her performance and the way that she's written is I know what you're saying, but I think I give it a little bit of leeway because this is kind of like this is the first interaction really with the Vulcans to this extent, or at least for this crew. Yeah. And I don't think
her,
that she's,
I would say she's the fish out of water stuck with a bunch of crazy humans. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't read it as her being angry as much as I read it as her being indifferent, which then reads to other people as angry, like the way that the way that you would, if your dad gets really quiet, you start getting worried that he's pissed off at you for some reason.
Yeah.
And then when you ask him about it, he's like, "No, I was just thinking about the football game."
Right. Yeah, I can.
That kind of thing. That kind of thing where it's like she's playing it as indifferent, but it is coming off as like annoyed and kind of angry.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm even sort of understanding of her being slightly angry. I guess she's not overacting. It's just her kind of like her resting demeanor seems like she's angry sometimes, and I don't know. I think it's probably unfair to hold it against her. I do think she's doing a good job in that role, and it's not always easy to play these Vulcans, but I think that she's playing it fairly appropriately. And we actually haven't. we haven't had a T'Pol episode yet, right? She's just been kind of there, sort of as a secondary character.
Yeah. Also, not to jump back to last episode, but I saw in the comments that the girl who played the bug expert actually was supposed to be a bigger part of the show, and then she died in real life.
Yes, although she died in 2003, so it's not like at the end of during the season or anything.
Oh, okay. Well, then fuck her.
Yeah,
no, but like that's too bad. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, because I think she's in 3 episodes of the show overall.
Okay, so she wasn't. It wasn't like they were grooming her to be the second lead, and then
this wasn't supposed to be like her follow-up episode. Was not supposed to be a focus on her or anything. She was just a recurring character throughout the first season. David Beardmore says, unexpected. This episode is highly skippable. The only interesting part was the Enterprise's only introduction of a holodeck, but then it gets ruined by some plastic gemstone sex, which is actually pretty rapey if you think about it. We didn't talk about I don't know why it's so hard for these aliens to just get water for some but
because it needs to be sexy water.
Yeah, it has to be and I find that just that seems funny, like the pointless electrical stuff that's going on that doesn't really tie into anything, and Trip just kind of going along with it is funny. I don't know. But,
it's just kinky, man.
Yeah, just nothing kinkier than feeding your loved one Jell-O.
There's a comic series called Prophet that came out. It was a book in the 90s. It was one of the big Image Comics boom books, and it was this big over the top. Huge muscle action book, and it got revamped maybe 5 or 6 years ago into this sort of like Conan in space, but not like the big muscular aspect of Conan. It just really leaned into the weirdness of space and aliens and what it would be like having a character like Conan in that situation. And there is so much weird bug alien on human sex. Yeah. And it's just like it is portrayed in this very nonchalant manner where it's just like, and then they decided to have to mate. Yeah. And it's like the Conan Prophet character just like face down in the open jelly midsection of like a bug alien. And it's like it does really lean into the weirdness of what getting way out into space and meeting creatures would be like. And it's a really good book. I highly recommend it.
Kyle Barrett says, unexpected. I love this episode. It's very silly, but also genuinely funny. Maybe the tone is problematic considering the episode revolves around Trip being space raped by an alien called Alan, but it's surprisingly entertaining. The male pregnancy plotline reeks of a lack of ideas, and yet it's the absolute perfect time to fall back on that old chestnut. What better way to show how strange and scary space can be to these new explorers than to suddenly have an alien growing inside you? It's part of what makes Ridley Scott's Alien so good, just with a very different tone. And I love that they make these aliens as weird as possible by throwing in every bizarre detail they can think of. Giant eel tanks? Sure. Grass flooring? Sure, you betcha. So despite some aren't pregnant people grumpy jokes and troublesome subject matter, I think this is the perfect episode for the early days of Enterprise. 5 out of 5. I promise you I'm not insane.
See, I continue to be fascinated by the huge divide on this show as far as these episodes, because like the last comment was this is a very skippable episode, and this one is, I assume, an unironic 5 out of 5.
Yeah, I think Kyle actually really likes it. I'm not going to give this a 5, but I like this episode.
Yeah. I mean, I don't trust anything Kyle says, but I don't think it's like it's. I'm waiting for the bad episodes, because so far I don't think they're bad.
Right.
I think that they're very watchable, and again, I feel like I don't know how much this show stands up to rewatchability so far. But I've enjoyed it for the most part.
Do you think that? I wonder how much of the rewatchability is just what Trek you were born with. Because if I'm remembering correctly, sure, Kyle's Star Trek is Enterprise because it was the first one he saw. So
sure, yeah.
I wonder if the rewatchability for you just comes down to the fact that is your series that you said. Like TNG would be my rewatchable Star Trek, mostly because it's the one that I grew up with the most. But I I feel that these episodes have been no more or less rewatchable than any of season 1 or 2 TNG or season 1 or 2 DS9. I think these are better episodes than the early Star Trek episodes in those other series.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think for me, the reason that I wonder about their rewatchability is because so much of it, for me anyway, is seeing how they deal with this Star Trek-y stuff for the first time. And it's not that it's like a twist or anything, but it has that same kind of feeling to me where it's like, oh well, I know how they do this, so I don't really, it doesn't really interest me to go back to it.
There's no depth to the storylines, really.
Yeah. Like, and as far as which one you grew up with, I also grew up with TNG, but I could very easily go back and watch random episodes of TOS.
Yeah.
And I think if you want to compare it, if it's more fair to compare it to TOS than to TNG, I think the difference is the stuff that they've been doing so far in Enterprise doesn't have as much of a novel hook to it as TOS does, where there's always something kind of weird and like a fun idea and like a fun situation or a crazy sci-fi situation that's like really engaging.
Yeah.
That can get you into a TOS episode. Whereas these ones, it does feel like it's very, as we said before, very workmanlike. And so it's even the aliens, as alien as they are, I have noticed that so far the aliens have all been fairly the same looking.
Yes.
So it's there's nothing like standing out to me where it's like, oh man, I can't wait to see the Allen race again.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just that kind of stuff where it's like, I enjoy the workman-like nature of the show, but I also feel like in going that way, there is sacrificing some excitement isn't the word, but like the newness of it and the engagement that I think some of the previous shows get.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of, because you were comparing it to TOS, it's kind of an interesting combination of DS9 and TOS. In a lot of ways, where it's got the character stuff of DS9, and it's got the new adventureness of TOS, but I don't think that it's fully embraced either of those two directions. Right. So it kind of feels like it's a mediocre version of both of those shows in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
that'll probably change, I would assume, but that's how it feels early here, and it's still we're only 5 episodes in, but I would definitely. If someone were to say, you can only keep one of the first season of Star Trek, I would say that Enterprise would be the one that I would keep by default almost. Like there's no one else is really close to it in terms of the quality so far.
The first season of TOS is pretty good.
Oh, that's
there's a lot of good stuff. That doesn't even count. That really doesn't count.
No, it feels totally different. I would agree. TOS, and I'm ashamed that I forgot it. The first season of TOS is good. So yeah, but if you're counting modern Star Trek, I guess I would just say Enterprise is probably the best so far out of all the ones we've seen.
I still think, for me, I think Bakula just isn't doing it for me. Or I don't know if it's just him or if it's the character of Archer. It's just I feel like having someone at the center there that is really engaging and a strong character is crucial for these shows to work.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if he's pulling that off.
A little bit of inside baseball, but when I go through and I have to find images to put on like the video clips and to make the thumbnails and everything like that, I look for some of the, like if I have a topic about Archer, I try to find an Archer picture. Bakula makes the same expression.
It's the same face.
In about 90% of his shots.
It's the only face he can do. It's that like the pitched eyebrow thing and like a Harrison Ford half smile.
Yes.
It's the only thing he knows how to do.
Yeah, he does.
Which is why I find it... It's why I find it so distracting and so difficult for me to get engaged with him, is because every line of dialogue he delivers comes through that filter.
Yeah.
So it's like I get the feeling like Archer is just writing everything off like he doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
It's all like kind of funny to him.
Right.
Which makes me think he's just a bad captain.
It's that Jerry Seinfeld bit of he understands why teachers don't like kids chewing gum in school, because no one chewing gum looks like they're taking something seriously. Like, yeah, all right. So Archer should just be chewing a big wad of bubble gum. Yeah.
Also, not exactly connected to that, but I was talking with Sean and another friend who's into Star Trek last night, and we were talking about Enterprise, and I was asking if they had seen it, and both of them gave the standard answer, which was like, yeah, it gets pretty good after like two or three seasons or so, and I hear that so much about all of these Star Trek shows, which is it's true, like TNG, Deep Space Nine, they don't really get good till the third season, but like saying that to somebody. You don't recognize that in real time, like when the show was on, that's like 5 years.
Yeah, it's a long time.
It's a long time for your show to be terrible.
It's 50 episodes, which is longer than a lot of modern TV shows run.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like if you at the time, back in let's go back to TNG. So if in like 1987, the Next Generation started. And you were a time traveler, and you went back to watch it. You watch it live with someone in 1987, and they were like, "Wow, that really sucked." And you said, "Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. It gets good at the third season." And they go, "That's 1992."
It's a long way away.
What am I supposed to do till then?
I know. You got nothing else to watch. It's true. And I think that well, we'll touch on it briefly. It's just that I think that these shows, because of the production schedule and what they had to do, they did not have the time to realize what was working in their first season or two. So, they by the time that this show came around, they knew how to do stock sci-fi episode. Like, you can see the improvement across all of them. Like, TNG is terrible. DS9 is semi-better, but it's not good. Voyager is slightly better, and then Enterprise is like semi-competent by this point. So they're getting better at just writing stock shows, but the shows themselves don't take on the personality that makes them what they are until a couple of years into it. So it's just a slow process.
It is kind of like how the record industry used to work a little bit. Like, back when they were just throwing money at everybody, you would be on a contract for like 3 albums. And they would let you kind of figure your shit out for the first 2 albums or so.
Yeah.
Like if you go back and you look at Rush's first 2 albums, they're fine, but they're just kind of like stock rock and roll albums. They don't turn into Rush until their 3rd album.
Yep.
And like if they had put their first album out and then got cut from their label, then you never have Rush. And depending on your stance on Rush, that's either a good thing or a bad thing, I guess. But it's like that. I do appreciate it. Does I am making light of the fact that it is a long time, but it is nice that there is, for some of these older shows, this they have enough rope where they can kind of figure their stuff out.
Yeah. Yep.
Because like we've said a million times before, there wasn't the same urgency for everything to be good right away, because there wasn't as much content as there is now.
Yeah, there's no competition. People are watching you no matter what kind of quality you're putting out, really. Like, you have to be awful to get canceled. Yeah. And
I wonder, does that play into... I think we still have more comments to go. I'm sorry I'm tangenting us so hard here. But does that play into why we you and I guess, but also we in general, react so negatively to shows when they're bad? Because it's like in the back of your head, you're like, I just wasted 10 weeks when I could have been watching the new season of Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
Like I have time to watch like 2 shows, and I picked this one and it's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, with the glut of content, it's almost like how when you play Keno, if you miss all the numbers, they reward you because of the sheer odds of you not picking a number properly is kind of impressive. It's kind of that way. Yeah. All these shows and you picked one that's terrible. Like, what are the odds of that?
Yeah.
So final comment, Neil Brennan. Unexpected. So, just so we're all in agreement here, the subtext of a big chunk of this episode is, what would it be like to screw an alien? And the answer is arm nipples. A bit of online research suggests that people hate this episode, but I loved it. It feels like some people behind the scenes wanted this to be a smart, weird show, but for whatever reason, could only express that through horny scripts and horny costume design for one character. 10 out of 10. Also, I can see my house from here. That's a great line. Thank you. Thank you very much, patrons, for your thoughts and your comments about Unexpected. If you guys want to leave comments, you just have to be the $5 tier on Patreon, and then go to the post on Patreon. It's pinned to the top of my list of posts, and leave a comment. Make sure you list what episode you're talking about, and let us know a brief couple sentences about your thoughts for that episode. That's it. Clay, what are you going to give this one? 1 to 5?
I'm going to... I still think I would say 3. I think it's still a solid episode. I don't think it's blowing my hair back, but I thought it was all right.
Yeah, I'm going to give it my first 4. I thought it was funny. Like maybe the first half is not particularly inspiring, but I think that once he's pregnant and sort of doing his thing there, I think that all of that really works. I like the Klingon charminess stuff at the end, even though it's potentially too much Klingon. I like the jokes. I like the humor. I like the performances. I think that it's kind of a weird alien idea. And yeah, it's not a Stone Cold classic for me, but it was the first episode that I was like, oh, like Amy might have actually enjoyed this if she was sitting with me watching this one. And I think that that's a 4 for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's it. Patreon.com/ThePenskyPal.
If my wife watched this with me, she wouldn't call me a nerd when it was over, so that's an instant 5.
She wouldn't have the conversation about the reverse Kino that we just had if I made her waste an hour of her life watching that episode.
She wouldn't start talking about guys she could have dated in college halfway through.
The most recent text message is someone called Matt. God damn it. Odds are she probably dated a Matt. Let's see here. I think we're done. Patreon.com/ThePenskyFile. Thank you very much for supporting the show. All the links are down below. ThePenskyFile.com/links. You can follow that to get everything. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
No, we get Rotten Horror Picture Show coming out next week. We'll be doing...
Ginger Snaps.
Thank you. Which is a really fun werewolf movie. If you've never seen it, you should check it out and listen to Amanda and I talk about it. And Sean and I are back recording the Badass podcast, so those should start coming out, I think, in a couple weeks, depending on how quickly I can get them banked in.
There we go. Badass and Rotten Horror. Thank you for listening to Star Trek. I think Real Ripe will come back at some point. We have Schwarzenegger to get through. Just waiting for some time, I suppose, but we're all quarantined, and we'll figure out some time at some point. But the Star Trek one continues on as normal. That's it. I guess we're done. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for listening to our coverage of Unexpected, and we will see you later.